You said, as I write these words, I'm in the early days of fighting a rare and aggressive cancer. And then you go on and you say, as you can imagine, this diagnosis has caused me to reflect on a whole litany of regrets. So my first question is, how you doing, man? Like, you want to talk about your cancer?
So I'm happy to talk about that. It's not any fun to talk about it, but it's important
Yeah.
to talk about it. I'm a healthy guy. I'm 56 years old. I've raised 5 kids. I've got my fifth, who's a junior in high school right now. And so I'm at the tail end of parenting. I've got 7 grandkids and an eighth on the way. And so life has been rich and full and good. God blessed me with a wonderful wife to partner with. But I've been a bastion of good health all my life. No problems, no issues. I've been healthy, skinny, just everything. And about a year and a half, 2 years ago, found a lump on my neck, kind of under my chin, and finally figured out what it was. It's a tumor. Well, we're not sure if it's benign or malignant. Let's go ahead and remove it because we got to remove it. And so while I was on the offering table in January of 23, they removed it. They did a biopsy on it while I was still on the table, still open, and determined it was something called adenoid cystic carcinoma. It's a very rare cancer. 4 in a million people get it, and so very rare. And so the doctor, I think he was Googling it while I was still in the operating room to figure out how much margins to pull out. So he went in deep and pulled out as much as he could, and did 35 treatments of radiation and some chemo in the spring of 23, did some scans that summer, and looked like we got it all. But one thing that's unique about this cancer is it has a tendency to metastasize to your lungs. And so that's kind of the pattern. And it can happen sometimes 5, 10, 15 years later. It just kind of shows up in your lungs. So one thing they do for the rest of your life is they scan you every 6 months, checking your neck where your tumor originally was, but also checking your lungs. And so I've had those scans and had a couple of good ones. But back at the 1st of August, got a scan of my lungs and they found some tumors there. Did a biopsy about a month later and determined that it was, in fact, the same kind of cancer. So I went from bad news to good news. We got it all, to a year later, a couple months ago, bad news again. So now I've got tumors growing in my lungs. The unfortunate thing is that it's too broad for radiation. This cancer does not respond to chemo very effectively. There's not an immunotherapy. So really, right now I've got stuff growing in my chest that wants to kill me, and there's not a real clear treatment option. It's strange because right now, I mean, I feel fantastic. I feel 100%, but it feels kind of like I'm a ticking time bomb. So going over to Houston, where I grew up. My mom lives in Houston, to go to MD Anderson next month to see if there's a clinical trial I can get dialed into. So right now we're in kind of a scary season. So the words of that book, the first chapter there, where I said, I'm really considering my mortality now, where I
Yeah.
never have before, and knowing that,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many days I've got left on this earth. I'm praying for a long life and for healing and for restoration, but I just don't know. And so today, I want to make the most of my days. I want to make the most of every moment that God gives me, given that I don't know what life I've got left.
You said something here I want to ask you about. You said this diagnosis has caused to reflect on a whole litany of regrets. So
Yeah.
I was just with a guy last night whose kids, one of his kids won't even talk to him anymore. And the guy's in his mid 60s. What are some of your biggest regrets as a father?
It's interesting. I've kind of started a little Word document, and I haven't started writing yet, but I've started a Word document of just what I would have done differently during in the trenches years of a lot of kids running around and
Yeah.
a lot of busyness. And boy, a long list of things that have come to mind. With my marriage, I would have communicated or told my wife and helped her believe convincingly just how much I love her and how much a treasure she is to me. Because I can tell her that, or I can suggest that, but I think our wives walk around with this, I don't know, a bit of insecurity. Am I lovable? Am I valuable? Am I
Oh,
beautiful?
yeah,
And if
100%.
I've done a less than perfect job of assuring her of that, then I've let myself down as a husband, let her down as a husband. So I really wanted to assure my wife. As a dad, I would have made the most of every single day. What are those little moments and opportunities God gives me to speak truth or to speak life or to build up my kids, when many days I think of how much time I wasted staring at a TV or at my phone, or just doing wasteful, useless things that will not echo and will not matter in eternity. And so those kind of regrets have really come to mind. And to the point of that book that I wrote in recent days, and we released this Disciple Them Like Jesus tool, I definitely would have been more intentional. And I'm trying to be more intentional to make disciples of those people that God has put in my sphere of influence, most particularly my kids and my grandkids. And so boy, if I could take more energy and more time back in the day and get some years back to be more purposeful in how I poured in Jesus into my kids, I'd have so many more days to use. Love it.
For more from this conversation, check out episode 782 of Men in the Arena podcast called 5 Leadership Secrets Jesus used that dads need to know, leading your kids, how Christ led the 12.